Nationwide protests in India have disrupted banking and transport services. Trade unions have called for a two-day strike against the government's economic policies. Now, millions of workers have taken to the streets demanding improved rights for industrial workers, employees and farmers. Banking services also affected. Bank unions oppose the government's plan to privatize at least two public sector banks. Well, Ishan Garg joins us live now from New Delhi. Ishan, with millions of workers out in the streets, what is the impact on essential services across the country?
Well, the impact has been patchy, really. In some states, you did not see any impact at all. For example, in the state of Uttar Pradesh, there were barely any workers out in the streets. The banks were largely functioning normally, and the trade unions were holding very small-scale protests. But in other states, for example, in southern India, in Kerala, the entire state literally was shut down to a certain degree. The banking services were not working properly. The transport services were not working properly. Again, in southern India, in the city of Chennai, the metro rail, the subway, saw a massive number of people taking the metro rail because the bus services were completely shut down, which was a major inconvenience for the residents of that city. Again, in the state of West Bengal, we saw massive protests, lots of people coming out onto the streets and disrupting essential services, not only banking and transportation, but also the unions have said that they were impacting the power production in the state as well. And there were concerns that there's going to be wide power outages in the state of West Bengal. But none of that has happened so far. But overall, several experts are saying that this call has had a lukewarm response across the country. The unions had called for a nationwide protest, and the protest doesn't seem nationwide as of now. But having said that, this is only day one of the protest. The protest will continue tomorrow as well, according to trade unions.
What exactly do these protesters want? Their specific demands? And also, any chance for a compromise between the unions and the government?
Well, at the core of that demands really is the idea of privatization. To begin with, the banks, the bank employees are saying that when the government does privatize the two banks it has reportedly shortlisted for privatizing, the bank workers, the employees will lose their benefits such as pensions and a lifetime security of jobs. The wider ranging demand is really an extension of this. So the unions are protesting against the government's $65 billion plan of asset monetization, under which the government plans to sell several state-owned assets to raise money as it wants to reduce the fiscal deficit. But apart from that, there are also wider-ranging concerns about labor practices as well. These trade unions are saying that the government wants to bring in labor laws that will make it easier for corporate bodies to exploit the laborers, the unskilled workers in the country, and they're protesting against those as well. And on top of that, there are some social causes as well that they are raising in their protest. They are demanding higher wages for health workers. They're also demanding higher wages for people who work in the voluntary sector, in the social work sector. So it's really an all-encompassing protest in which we are seeing that a lot of the demands that are being raised by the protesters are essentially asking the government of a bit more support to the downtrodden, of a bit more support for the people who are marginalized or people who come from weaker sections of the society.
Well, thanks very much for those updates. Ishan Garg in New Delhi.